Cologne, 6 March 1945, late morning. Cold air and brick dust hang under the cathedral's towers while a ruined city exhales smoke. In a side street off the square, a German heavy tank waits in ambush, its crew sure of thick plate and the 8.8-centimeter gun. Through the sight, the world is narrow, broken brick, drifting ash, until a shape slides into view, lower and broader than the usual Shermans, with a long, unfamiliar barrel. The first German round skips across the stones and bursts on distant masonry. A second follows. The newcomer slews and answers. A 90mm M3 speaks once, then again, and the commander knows distance is no shield. Plate trusted to turn blows opens. Flame licks through the fighting compartment, and the engine coughs black smoke. Many onlookers will call the victim a tiger, habit by 1945, but records place a panther at this corner. The effect on morale is the same. A U.S. Signal Corps cameraman, CPL Jim Bates, keeps filming as the duel ends in seconds. Smoke grips the square. Over cellars and radio nets, the message runs, "The Americans have a tank that can meet Germany head-on." Its name, M26 Pershing, belongs to 3rd Armored Division, one of only a few rushed forward in early 1945. The myth buckles with the wreck. To learn how this machine reached Cologne at all, we step back to the choices that forged it. Winter 1943, near Leningrad. The land is frozen iron, and the air itself seems to ring when engines turn over. Out of the birch forest rolls a machine that looks carved from steel cliffs, the Tiger Freyr. To Soviet soldiers peering from their trenches, it is a moving fortress, its wide tracks crushing snowdrifts that swallow lesser vehicles. The first shell from its 88mm KWK-36 cannon punches through a T-34 as though paper. The second turns another to fire and steam. Across the Eastern Front, German radio operators begin to call it Der Tiger, said with a mix of pride and awe, while those on the other side whisper it as a curse. From 1942 through 1944, wherever it appears, from the steppe outside Kharkov to the hedgerows of Normandy, the Tiger is less a tank than a presence. Its 120mm frontal armor shrugs off nearly every Allied round. Crews inside M4 Shermans know that even 5-to-1 they are at a disadvantage. The Allies' 75mm shells bounce like stones off the Tiger's flanks, and those who face it call the dread Tiger Panic. In the bocage, American columns sometimes halt merely on hearing a rumor that one lurks ahead. Each battlefield sighting grows the legend. Aces such as Michael Whitman of the 101st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion turn it into myth. His Tiger 007 destroys entire platoons in minutes at Villers Bocage, and the story spreads faster than truth. For Allied crews, survival means calling air support, smoke, or retreat. Even when the Allies begin to field the Firefly and the British 17-pounder, success feels like luck, not parity. But by late 1944, the empire that built these iron beasts is starving. Bombed railways delay spare parts, and fuel becomes rarer than ammunition. Air superiority now belongs to the Allies, and every Tiger that moves risks being seen and struck from above. Yet still, in the mud of the Hurtgen forest and the snow of the Ardennes, no American tank can challenge it face to face. After each battle, U.S. ordnance teams study the wreckage of their own burned Shermans and send reports upward. The pattern is undeniable. To finish the war, America must build a tank that can kill a Tiger frontally and survive to tell of it. Out of those reports, and the frustration of thousands of crewmen, comes a directive to Detroit: design a new heavy tank fast. Thus begins the race that will give birth to the M26 Pershing, a machine meant to end the Tiger's reign of fear. Spring 1943, Detroit Arsenal Tank Plant, steel, sweat, and thunder. Inside the world's largest tank factory, sparks burst like fireworks as welders work beside rows of half-assembled Shermans. Over the din of riveting hammers, a new debate echoes through the Ordnance Department's design offices. How can America counter the Tigers and Panthers now tearing through Europe? The M4 Sherman, beloved for its dependability and ease of repair, has proven no match for Germany's evolving armor. Colonel Joseph Colby and his engineers know they must think bigger, thicker, and deadlier. They begin with the T-20 experimental line, an entire family of test vehicles meant to push the limits of what an American tank can be. Early models experiment with the 76mm gun and new torque converter transmissions. Others, like the T-23, test electric drives far ahead of their time. Each failure teaches a lesson in weight distribution, recoil absorption, and crew ergonomics. The T-25 marks a turning point, mounting the 90mm M3 gun that can punch through 120mm of armor at 1,000 yards. Then comes the prototype that changes everything. The T-26E3, a 46-ton machine with 102mm of sloped frontal armor, torsion bar suspension for smoother ride, and a Ford GAF V8 engine capable of propelling it over rough terrain at 25 miles per hour. Yet, in Washington, progress meets resistance. General Leslie McNair's Army Ground Forces insist speed and numbers win wars, not weight and complexity. Production backlogs and bureaucratic inertia slow what could have been a revolution in 1943, only after the bloodletting in Normandy, where Sherman losses mount. Alarmingly, does urgency override caution? In late 1944, the order finally comes: build 1,000 units. The T-26E3 now carries a name worthy of its promise, the M26 Pershing, in honor of General John J. Pershing, leader of the American Expeditionary Forces in the Great War. At Aberdeen Proving Ground, the first Pershings thunder down the test track, their long 90mm guns recoiling against the Maryland sky. Soldiers and engineers alike watch in silence, realizing this is not just another tank, it is a symbol of transformation. America's war machine, once defined by quantity, has turned toward quality. And soon, this iron air will cross the Atlantic to prove itself against the tigers that inspired its birth. December 1944. Snow sweeps across New York Harbor as Liberty ships rock gently at their moorings. Decks stacked with crates marked only with serial numbers and the cryptic designation Project Zebra. Beneath the winter fog, stevedores guide massive silhouettes aboard. 46 tons of armored steel apiece, their guns covered with tarpaulins, their presence unannounced to the press. The cargo is secret even to most of the men handling it. America's newest heavy tank, the M26 Pershing. While Europe reels under the shock of the Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, Washington gambles that these machines might shift the tide. Through December's Atlantic storms, the Liberty ships plow eastward, escorted by destroyers wary of U-boats still haunting the sea lanes. Each tank is chained to the deck, salt crusting their armor, the Atlantic spray freezing on their hulls. When they reach Antwerp in January 1945, dock workers stand silent as the cranes lift them onto Belgian soil. The tanks gleam dull and new under a sky bruised by smoke from distant V-2 impacts. The U.S. 3rd and 9th Armored Divisions received them, just 50 machines for an army of thousands. Crews accustomed to Shermans climb inside and find a new world. Electric turret traverse, a gyrostabilizer that steadies the 90mm gun, and hydraulic controls that respond like power steering. Training begins in the bitter cold near Spa and Huy. Mechanics learn to wrestle with the heavier tracks and wider suspension. Bridge engineers study their load charts with unease. Some bridges groan under the Pershing's weight, and transporters strain at every turn. Yet among the tankers, excitement eclipses concern. They whisper about the Super Sherman, a tank that could finally duel the German Big Cats on equal terms. Allied lines hum with rumor, but German intelligence dismisses it as fantasy. Surely, they believe, the Americans could not field a heavy tank before war's end. By February, the first Pershings roll east toward the Rhine, their paint still fresh from Detroit. None of the men driving them can guess that within weeks one of these machines will meet a German tiger amid the shattered streets of Cologne, and that their encounter will end an March 6, 1945, Cologne, noon. The city is a gray skeleton, echoing with the clatter of machine gun bursts and the distant thud of collapsing masonry. Snow and ash mingle in the air, clinging to scorched stone and shattered glass. Through this wasteland crawls Task Force Wellborn of the U.S. 3rd Armored Division, inching toward the Rhine under the shadow of the great Gothic cathedral. At the spearhead moves a single M26 Pershing, new, untested, its steel still bearing the scent of factory oil. Inside, Lieutenant Robert Early commands, while gunner Clarence Smoyer peers through his sight, scanning for the ambush every veteran dreads. Across the square, concealed among the ruins of the Domplatz, a tiger eye waits. The German crew of Panzer Company 224 has been ordered to hold the heart of Cologne at all costs. Through their optics, they glimpse movement. A low-slung American silhouette, unfamiliar, longer-barreled, menacing. For months they have faced only Shermans, easily dispatched with a single shot. But this tank looks different. The gunner squeezes the trigger. The 88mm shell screeches across the square and smashes against the Pershing's mantlet, gouging steel but failing to penetrate. Inside Early's tank, Smoyer's calm reply follows. The 90mm M3 gun recoils with a deafening crack. The armor-piercing round slams into the Tiger's lower hull, cutting through the plate and detonating ammunition. A blossom of flame bursts from the turret ring. The tank erupts in seconds, a column of black smoke twisting beside the cathedral spire. The battle lasts less than 20 seconds. From a nearby balcony, U.S. Signal Corps cameraman Sergeant Jim Bates captures every moment. The duel, the explosion, the stunned infantry ducking for cover. His film will later circle the world. German survivors, watching helplessly from adjoining positions, can scarcely believe it. "Our Tiger burned like paper," one later wrote. For years, the 88mm gun had been the master of the battlefield. Now it met its equal. When the footage reaches Allied headquarters, disbelief gives way to exhilaration. At last, an American tank has slain a Tiger head-on. The myth of invincibility is gone, and the Pershing's arrival signals a new age of armor. Yet for the men of the 3rd Armored Division, Cologne is only the beginning. Ahead lie the Rhine crossings, the Ruhr, and the final drive into the heart of Germany, where the Pershing's reputation will be forged in fire. By March 10, 1945, the reports began filtering upward through the battered hierarchy of the Wehrmacht. From Cologne came the first accounts, vague at first, then increasingly alarmed, of a new American tank that had destroyed a Tiger in open combat. Field intelligence summaries from the West here described a heavy U.S. Panzer armed with a 9mm gun and possessing armor comparable to the Tiger. Analysts from Panzer Lehr Division pored over captured fragments of shell casing and photographs smuggled from the front, estimating the machine's weight at nearly 50 tons. If true, they reasoned, the Americans had finally matched Germany's heaviest armor. Within days, unease rippled through the ranks. Reports from the 5th Panzer Army noted infantry refusing to engage approaching tanks for fear they were the new giant. "Every Sherman is now suspected to be the heavy one," one officer lamented. In the chaos of retreat, rumor outpaced fact. By mid-March, the propaganda ministry struggled to contain whispers that Tigers burned in Cologne. Joseph Goebbels' censors ordered editors to omit any mention of new Allied tanks. But frontline chatter could not be silenced. The long-barreled silhouette glimpsed through smoke began to haunt every German tanker's imagination. Across the lines, the psychological tide turned. Clarence Smoyer's photograph beside the ruined Tiger spread through Stars and Stripes, captioned simply, "The Tiger Falls." To weary Sherman crews who had long fought at a disadvantage, it was proof that the tide of technology had finally shifted. German prisoners of war, questioned by Allied intelligence, expressed disbelief that America now builds heavy tanks faster than we can build Panzer Rifles. In that single month, the Pershing ceased to be an experiment and became a symbol, an embodiment of industrial inevitability. Yet even victory brought new challenges. The behemoth strained transporters, devoured fuel, and lacked spare parts. The Pershing's success had to be matched by America's logistical genius, the next test of a nation that had turned its factories into an arsenal of democracy. By early 1945, the roar of war production in America drowned out the last echoes of German industry. Over the skies of Kassel and Essen, Allied bombers reduced once proud factories to twisted frameworks of steel. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Detroit's forges thundered day and night. The Detroit Arsenal tank plant, run by Chrysler for the Ordnance Department, had already mastered the mass production of Shermans. In 1944, it retooled to birth the M26 Pershing, a task of both engineering and logistics genius. Every tank required roughly 5,000 man-hours to complete, a quarter of the labor demanded by a single Tiger Y from Henschel and Sohn in Kassel. The difference was not merely mechanical, it was systemic. America's industrial machine ran like an organism, coordinated, fed, and tireless. Standardization was the secret. Ford's GAF V8 engines arrived by rail from Michigan, turret castings from Ohio, tracks from Illinois. Each factory built to the same specification, ensuring that a part from one plant fit another without adjustment. Rail convoys moved tanks to the East Coast in precise intervals, where Liberty ships carried them through U-boat-infested waters to Antwerp. By the time the first Pershings fired in combat, more were already in transit, and spare parts followed like a second wave of reinforcements. In contrast, Germany's industrial landscape was collapsing. Shortages of fuel, alloy steel, and skilled labor turned Henschel's workshops into graveyards of unfinished hulls. By February 1945, fewer than 100 Tigers left German factories, many without optics or engines due to bomb damage. Repair depots struggled to cannibalize parts just to keep old Panzers moving. To German officers, the Pershing's appearance meant more than a new weapon. It was a revelation of what America could sustain indefinitely. Each destroyed tank could be replaced tenfold, each battle loss erased within weeks. By spring, Pershings were crossing the Rhine on pontoon bridges, their reliability proving that industrial mass, not mechanical genius, would decide the war. The age of German craftsmanship had yielded to the power of American production, a truth written in smoke above the Ruhr. March 7, 1945, Remagen, Germany. The Rhine gleams cold and silver beneath a gray sky as thunder echoes from the West Bank. Against all odds, elements of the U.S. 9th Armored Division seize the Ludendorff Bridge intact, the last standing span across the river. Explosives had failed to bring it down, and for the first time in the war, the Allies have a bridgehead over the Rhine. Within hours, engineers swarm the structure, reinforcing its battered girders while tanks line up to cross. Among them are the new giants, the M26 Pershings, bellowing with the deep, steady rhythm of their Ford engines as they advance into history. The crossing is perilous. German artillery pounds the bridge from cliffs above Erpel, and Luftwaffe bombers dive through clouds to strike what Hitler has called a gift from fate to the enemy. But the Pershings hold their line, their armor shrugging off shrapnel and small arms fire. Once on the eastern bank, they fan out through the burning town, their 90mm guns methodically silencing strong points hidden in basements and behind stone walls. For infantrymen who had once relied on Shermans and prayer, the Pershing feels like invincibility given form. Farther east, the 509th Heavy Panzer Battalion deploys its last Tiger II King Tiger tanks to stem the breach. At over 70 tons, they remain formidable, yet their commanders soon find the balance of terror shifting. Near Euskirchen, one King Tiger is destroyed at over 1,000 meters, pierced through its glacis by a Pershing's armor-piercing round. Another falls moments later to American anti-tank guns. "Our King Tigers are hunted like prey," a German tanker notes bitterly in his diary. Recognizing the impossible truth, the enemy now holds technical equality. From Remagen, the offensive fans outward. Siegen, Euskirchen, the Ruhr, Pershings lead the assaults, their stabilized M3 guns allowing deadly first-shot accuracy even on the move. For the Wehrmacht, each engagement confirms a grim reality, the unstoppable momentum of Allied armor. By month's end, the Rhine crossings are secure, and the Pershing stands not merely as a weapon, but as the emblem of an irreversible advance. Ahead lies the industrial heart of Germany, and with it, the final unraveling of the Panzer legend. April 1945, the Western Front is collapsing. But in the minds of German tank crews, something deeper has already broken. For years, the name Tiger had carried a mystique of invulnerability. Crews believed their 88mm guns would always dominate, that their thick armor would always hold. Then came Cologne. Then Remagen. Then the reports, relentless, undeniable, of American tanks with long 9-centimeter guns destroying Tigers frontally. The shock spread faster than the news of lost cities. Prisoner interrogations from the Ruhr pocket captured the disbelief in plain words. We thought the Americans feared us. Now it is we who hide from them. Across the battlefields of the Rhineland, that reversal of confidence became palpable. Wehrmacht diaries speak of Pershings rumbling through rubble like iron beasts from another world. Panzer commanders who once led from the front now fired from ambush and fled after the first shot. Even the King Tigers, those massive monuments of German engineering, seemed suddenly mortal. Soldiers whispered that the Allies had created a super tank that never missed. The fear that once froze Allied columns now haunted the German lines. For the Americans, the psychological tide lifted morale as surely as a rising sun. Infantrymen who had once hesitated at the sound of the 88mm now advanced behind Pershings with steady courage. General Omar Bradley noted in his April reports, "Our boys walk taller when that 90mm is ahead." Tank crews who had watched friends burn in Shermans felt, for the first time, equal to their enemy. Newspapers and Stars and Stripes splashed photographs of Cologne's destroyed Tiger under bold headlines, and Allied propagandists seized the moment. Leaflets dropped across the Ruhr carried the image of that burning hulk with the caption, "Das Ende des Mythos," the end of the myth. For the average Lancer retreating east, the symbol was unmistakable. The Tiger, once a totem of strength, had become a monument to futility. The faith that German technology could reverse defeat was gone, replaced by grim endurance. Yet on scattered fronts, a few remaining Tiger II units still fought, determined to prove the legend wasn't entirely dead. For Pershing crews pressing toward the Elbe, that final defiance would demand new tactics and mark the closing chapter of the armored war in Europe. By April 1945, the Pershing had transformed how the U.S. Army fought. No longer forced to rely on massed Shermans and risky flanking maneuvers, Allied commanders now had a weapon capable of leading from the front. The M26's 90mm M3 gun, combined with thick armor and stable optics, made it ideal for city fighting, where the Tiger and Panther had once ruled. In Dusseldorf, Pershings rolled ahead of infantry platoons, smashing through roadblocks and silencing machine gun nests with pinpoint shots. Engineers clearing mines and bridges followed in their wake, shielded by the tank's broad hull. At Essen, where Sherman units had bled heavily in previous assaults, Pershings took point across factory-lined streets, shrugging off Panzerfaust hits that would have turned lighter tanks into fireballs. General Maurice Rose of the 3rd Armored Division recognized their potential immediately. Rather than dispersing Pershings across companies, he concentrated them into spearhead units, using their firepower to puncture German defenses and their shock value to scatter resistance. The sight of the long-barreled American tank advancing through smoke often prompted defenders to surrender before a shot was fired. Reports from the 9th Army's G2 intelligence branch in mid-April recorded instances of entire German platoons abandoning positions at the first glimpse of the new heavy American tank. Strategically, the Pershing's arrival came too late to change the war's endgame. The Reich was already crumbling, but its psychological and tactical effects were profound. For the first time in Europe, the United States possessed a tank that outmatched the enemies on every level: mobility, accuracy, and reliability. German intelligence acknowledged the shift bluntly. Enemy heavy tanks now surpass ours in number and quality. The M26 had proven that technical parity, combined with logistical supremacy, could dismantle an opponent's doctrine built on fear and finesse. As Germany's cities burned and the Wehrmacht retreated toward surrender, one truth became clear: wars of attrition would henceforth be decided by those who could innovate and mass-produce. The Pershing embodied that synthesis, a preview of the armored age to come. Yet even victory revealed flaws. Its engine strained under weight, its transmission ran hot, and its fuel consumption was prodigious. Those lessons would shape the next generation of American armor, machines designed not only to win battles, but to define them. The battlefield, as always, became the truest proving ground. By April 1945, Pershing crews had discovered that even victory came with mechanical lessons written in oil and fire. The tank's 500-horsepower Ford GAF engine, reliable in tests, often struggled under combat loads. On steep slopes or deep mud, the 46-ton giant lumbered forward slowly, its acceleration far below that of the nimble Sherman. Transmission overheating plagued early units, forcing temporary halts during long advances. Bridge engineers, too, found themselves improvising. Pontoon spans groaned beneath the tank's weight, and in some cases Pershings had to detour miles to find crossings strong enough to bear them. But the U.S. Army's wartime ecosystem, field workshops, mobile depots, and ordnance battalions turned those weaknesses into opportunities. Mechanics fitted new cooling systems and strengthened gear housings with remarkable speed. Within weeks, Detroit engineers received detailed reports from the front and began refining the design. The M26A1 variant emerged with an improved M3A1 gun equipped with a muzzle brake to reduce recoil stress, as well as enhanced ventilation for the engine compartment. Suspension teams tested new horizontal volute spring, HVSS systems to smooth the ride and better distribute weight, laying the groundwork for a lighter, faster successor. These iterative fixes marked a philosophical shift as much as an engineering one. In America's production model, flaws were not failings but feedback, each defect a blueprint for progress. German crews, by contrast, had no such luxury. By 1945, their factories lay in ruins, spare parts scarce, and their vaunted Tigers stood immobile for want of fuel or tracks. The Pershing, meanwhile, adapted and endured. As captured Tigers and Panthers arrived at Aberdeen for study, U.S. designers dissected every detail. From those dissections came the post-war evolution, the M26 Patton, and a lineage of tanks that would rule the Cold War battlefield. The machine born to slay the Tiger was already evolving to outlive it. May 1945 brought silence to Europe, but for the M26 Pershing, the story was far from over. As the guns ceased and the Allies occupied a broken Germany, Pershings remained on duty across the ruins of the Reich, parked in cobbled squares, guarding depots and patrolling shattered roads once ruled by Tigers. Yet even as they stood as symbols of victory, engineers in Detroit were already planning their rebirth. Wartime experience had shown that the Pershing's armor and gun were excellent, but its power plant lagged behind its potential. The Ordnance Department began an ambitious overhaul, replacing the aging 500 horsepower Ford GAF engine with a new 704 horsepower Continental AV 190 and installing a robust Allison CD 850 transmission. The result, completed in 1949, was the M46 Patton, a faster, more reliable machine capable of keeping pace with mechanized divisions. The M46 represented more than an upgrade. It marked the beginning of a new philosophy. No longer were tanks divided into light, medium, or heavy categories. The Patton embodied the emerging concept of the main battle tank, a single design balancing firepower, protection, and mobility. Its successors, the M47 and M48, refined this formula and carried Pershing's genetic code into the next conflicts. From Korea's frozen hills to the plains of West Germany, across the defeated Reich, captured German engineers examined Pershings with a professional's reluctant respect. At Henschel's ruined Castle Works, former Tiger designers studied the American tank's systems and noted how their own innovations, sloped armor, wide tracks, stabilized guns, had been perfected and mass-produced by their enemy. The arms race they began had come full circle. The Pershing's fusion of power and pragmatism became the cornerstone of Western armored doctrine, influencing everything from Britain's Centurion to France's AMX-50. What had begun as an emergency countermeasure to the Tiger evolved into the blueprint of post-war superiority. The next chapter would ensure its immortality, not in steel, but on film, where the Cologne duel would transform from a battlefield event into enduring legend. The film begins in silence, Cologne's cathedral rising like a black monument against a pale, war-torn sky. Then, within seconds, motion and violence erupt. A German Tiger tank appears, fires and misses. Across the square, an American M26 Pershing answers, its 90mm shell streaking through dust and smoke. The Tiger explodes in a flash of flame beneath the twin spires, and the camera, steady, unblinking, captures the moment that symbolized an empire's collapse. Sergeant Jim Bates's footage, shot from a nearby balcony on March 6, 1945, would become one of the most famous pieces of combat film ever recorded. Within weeks, the scene was shown in newsreels across the United States. Crowds in theaters watched in awe as the invincible German tank burned in broad daylight. For American audiences, it represented vindication, the triumph of industrial ingenuity and courage over fearsome reputation. For Germans, who later saw it in captured Allied broadcasts, it was humiliation preserved forever, a symbol of defeat played endlessly on silver screens. Historians later called it the death of the Tiger's myth, captured in 20 seconds of film. After the war, military analysts and engineers studied each frame meticulously. They measured the shell's trajectory, timing, and velocity, nearly 3,000 feet per second, confirming the Pershing's lethality and the precision of Clarence Smoyer's aim. But beyond the ballistics lay something deeper, a glimpse of modern war's new reality. The duel was not dramatic chaos, but surgical destruction, mechanized, impersonal, inevitable. Over the decades, documentaries, museums, and war colleges have returned to those few seconds, using them to illustrate a turning point in armored warfare. The Cologne duel distilled the essence of 20th century combat, where technology, training, and fate met in perfect, devastating harmony. As the war's fires faded, that burning tiger beneath the cathedral remained, frozen in film, a haunting monument to both the end of an era and the birth of another. By the spring of 1945, the battlefield had fallen silent except for the grinding advance of Allied armor. The Tiger, once the embodiment of German might, now stood as a broken monument, its mechanical growl drowned beneath the steady thunder of American engines. The M26 Pershing had come late to the war, but not too late to announce a new order. Its duel at Cologne was more than the destruction of a single tank. It was the symbolic transfer of power from one industrial age to another. German tank crews who had once hunted across Europe now found themselves hunted instead. They hid their panzers beneath trees, buried their hulls in rubble, and fired in desperation at a foe they could neither outfight nor outproduce. The Pershing represented more than armor and steel. It embodied a doctrine of precision, logistics, and relentless momentum. Each advance across the Rhine and into the Ruhr marked the triumph not of one machine, but of an entire system built to outlast any opponent. From those last weeks of the Reich's collapse emerged the template for modern armored warfare. The Pershing's profile, the long barrel, the low hull, the deliberate balance of speed and strength, became the silhouette of the post-war world, evolving into the Patton and, eventually, the entire generation of Cold War armor. History remembers the M26 not for how many were built, but for what it proved, that no empire, no weapon, remains unchallenged forever. As the smoke drifted over Cologne's cathedral, the Tiger's reign ended, and in its ashes, the modern American war machine was born.